Groovy.
Hey everybody, Jim here, welcome back. You know, a little while back I did a video on my top 10 Capcom fighting games, and the response was pretty positive, and a lot of people suggested that since I'm also a big fan of SNK, that I should do a follow-up video on my top 10 SNK fighting games, and I thought that was a really good idea, so that's what we're doing today, my personal top 10 SNK fighting games. Okay, so before we get started, I'll once again explain the rules that I used when putting together this list. Number one is that it's only one game per series to keep the list nice and diverse. Also, I only considered games published by either SNK or ADK, so I didn't take into account all NeoGeo games, fighting games published by Sunsoft or Technos Japan or Data East, for example. Only SNK and ADK, and of course I have to give the obligatory, this is just one man's opinion, this is totally subjective, this is in no way a definitive list. I'm sure you all have your favorites too, and I'd like to hear what they are, but with that being said, let's get started. Number 10. Tsukai Gangan Koshinkyoku, otherwise known as Aggressors of Dark Combat, an ADK-developed, SNK-published one-on-one fighter released in 1994. I really like this game for a number of reasons. I like the characters, I like the graphics and sound, and I like that it plays very unlike any of the other games on this list. It controls more like a wrestling game or a beat-em-up mixed with a 2D fighter, sort of like Fire Suplex, or maybe even Final Fight Revenge. Every character has an array of special moves and super combos that are executed like they would be in pretty much any other fighting game, but there are also weapons all over the ground to pick up and use against your opponent. Onlookers throw items into the battlefield, there are destructible elements to the environment, hazards to look out for, there's just a lot going on here. On top of that, it's also just really fun. It's far from perfect, but I really enjoy it. Aggressors of Dark Combat, a very cool and often overlooked game. Number 9. Fun Moku Shiroku Kakuto Sosei, or you can use the shorter English title Savage Rain. It's a 1995 release, and it's actually kind of a sequel to Fatal Fury, as it is set in Southtown in the near future, though it's now called Japang City, a nice little nod to the Far East of Eden series. It actually plays kind of like an updated Fatal Fury as well, allowing you to jump in and out of the foreground and background, except that here you can actually launch projectile attacks at your opponent and even throw pieces of some stages at them. It plays really well, as you'd expect of a mid-90s SNK fighter, and it features a cast of some really wacky characters, definitely not your typical fighting game lineup. Plus the graphics are really good, and so is the sound design. Savage Rain and the sequel Kizuna Encounter are another couple of games in SNK's library that seem to have been forgotten over time, and that's a real shame. I obviously wouldn't place this game above Fatal Fury, but I can definitely say that it's a worthy successor and well worth playing. Number 8.
World Heroes Perfect!
World Heroes Perfect is a 1995 release and the last in the World Heroes series, which is presented as being developed and published by ADK, but it was actually a joint effort between them and SNK, SNK now owning all of the ADK properties. This is a much more straightforward fighter than the first two games on this list. It plays pretty much just like any other, and it plays really well. You get a whole bunch of characters taken from different points in history, apparently by a scientist named Doc Brown, which is an obvious nod to Back to the Future, and they're forced to fight for your amusement, and it is a very diverse cast, both in terms of design and their playstyles. There's something here for everyone. Every character has plenty of special moves and combos to learn. The deathmatch mode has been removed, but the game plays so well, I really don't care. Plus, there are some beautiful graphics and amazing sound design on display here. The entire World Heroes series is awesome, and one I'd recommend getting into if you haven't already, but if you play only one of them, I'd say go with World Heroes Perfect. It's the best in the series, and a damn fine fighting game overall. Great Scott! Number 7.
NeoGeo Battle Colosseum!
NeoGeo Battle Colosseum, a 2005 release, and another one that seems to have been overlooked by most gamers. And again, that's really too bad because this is actually an excellent 2D tag fighter. It's basically like another addition to the King of Fighters series, featuring lots of the same characters and similar gameplay, but it also includes lots of characters that had never been featured in KOF from games like Aggressors of Dark Combat, World Heroes, Last Blade, even Metal Slug, and King of the Monsters, which is just awesome. Plus, the gameplay is really solid. You can pull off some very cool looking tag team attacks. The graphics are excellent with a lot of little details and cameos in each stage that'll make SNK fans happy, and the soundtrack is pretty strong too. This is essentially what Capcom was trying to do with Capcom Fighting Jam, but I think this game just blows that one out of the water. It's fun and a great little piece of SNK fan service. NeoGeo Battle Colosseum, an undeniably cool game.
You win!
Mission complete.
Number 6. Ryuko no Ken, translated to Fist of Dragon and Tiger, which I think is an extremely awesome name that brings to mind a Shaw Brothers film, but most people will probably know it by its Western title, Art of Fighting. This was originally released in arcades in 1992, but my first time playing it was when I borrowed the SNES version from a friend, and I immediately loved the characters and plot, which brought to mind a lot of the martial arts movies that I loved so much. I liked the characters, environments, the graphics and sound were great, and that was just the SNES version. When I finally got my hands on a legitimate NeoGeo version, the appreciation just grew. I still love everything about this game. The camera that moves in and out during battle, the damage that accumulates on your character in each round, the awesome bonus rounds that allow you to power up your character, the great soundtrack and excellent graphics, the designs of all the characters and stages. It all just fits together so well in a way that's kind of cheesy, but also really enjoyable, or at least for me it is. The sequels are also great, and in some respects better games, but the original Art of Fighting is still my favorite of the bunch, and one I go back to from time to time when I want to relive those childhood fantasies of being in a low-budget, poorly scripted, but ultimately awesome 90s action flick. This one truly is a classic. Number 5. Here we go. Bakumatsu Roman Dainimaku Gekko no Kenshi Tsuki ni Sakuhana Chiri Yukuhana. But thankfully it was shortened to just Last Blade 2. I first played this 1998 release on the Sega Dreamcast some 15 years ago. I saw the cover and the SNK logo and thought to myself, I wonder if this is another game in the Samurai Showdown series, but when I got home and started playing it, I realized that no, this was something altogether different, and I absolutely loved it. It immediately brought to mind samurai movies and anime that I had been watching all throughout my teenage years. The characters, the combat, the quiet ambience of some of the stages, it was so steeped in atmosphere that I was sucked in from the very beginning. You have a couple of different gameplay styles to choose from, speed and power type, both offering different advantages and weaknesses, and a cast of characters that also run the gamut from light and agile to huge and lumbering. The graphics are great, the sound design is subtle but also really good, and the overall style and atmosphere make every battle feel like it's ripped straight from an Akira Kurosawa film or an episode of Rurouni Kenshin. On top of that, and most importantly, the gameplay is very smooth and extremely fun. If you've never played either of the Last Blade games, I would highly recommend that you do. They are amazing. Number 4.
武士道とは死ぬことと見つけたり、修羅道とは倒すことと見つけたり、我悪鬼羅刹となりって目の前の敵すべてを切る。
Samurai Spirits, aka Samurai Showdown. Now this is a series with a lot of installments, and to be fair, it's a series that made a lot of improvements over time. But the 1993 original will always be my favorite. This was actually my first experience ever with an SNK fighter when I came across some older kids playing it in a shopping center arcade. I was already a big fan of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but this was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. The graphics were amazing, and there were samurai warriors with cool weapons, throwing tornadoes and fireballs at each other. I was absolutely mesmerized. When I finally got my chance to play, I was hooked. There was just something about it as a kid that I thought was so damn cool. To this day, I still go back to this game more than any other in the series. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I absolutely love the characters, the graphics, the soundtrack, and of course, the gameplay. Every time I play it, Samurai Spirits takes me right back to being 8 years old and being in awe of just how awesome fighting games could be. The whole series is great, and you're guaranteed to have a good time no matter which one you play, but this is my personal favorite. 8-year-old me totally approves. Number 3.
SVC Chaos, SNK vs Capcom.
SVC Chaos. Now this is awesome. If you saw my top 10 Capcom fighting games list, then you know how much I love the Capcom vs SNK games. And here we get to see the flip side, and what happens when Capcom characters are put into the hands of SNK. And not surprisingly, what we get is an outstanding fighting game that definitely bears all the marks of its developer. I love the redesigned Capcom characters made to fit the SNK look, as well as the inclusion of some characters that hadn't yet appeared in a versus fighting game, like Dimitri from Darkstalkers, Hugo from Street Fighter 3, and even Mega Man Zero. The roster altogether reaches 36 characters, and it's a very diverse mix. My personal favorites are still here, i.e. Ken Masters and Terry Bogard, but I do enjoy giving some of the more unorthodox characters a play every once in a while. The graphics are great, as is the sound design, and the gameplay is simply amazing. I can play this game for hours on end, and even longer if I've got a few people to play with. I don't like it quite as much as Capcom vs SNK 2, but it is a very slim margin. SVC Chaos is an exemplary 2D fighter.
SVC
Number 2.
The King of Fighters 11.
The King of Fighters 11, and this was a tough choice. I knew a KOF game would be high on the list, but I didn't know which one, because honestly I have a lot of favorites, namely 98 and Dream Match 99, but this is the one that I go back to most often. It has a huge and varied roster of up to 40 playable characters, with the addition of a lot of first-timers, including characters from Buriki 1 and Savage Reign, which is awesome. It allows you to choose between tag matches, traditional KOF team elimination matches, and one-on-one, and there's even a very cool challenge mode if you're playing the PS2 ports. A lot of people point to the game's boss as being just about the cheapest in the history of video games. And that is true, but it doesn't hinder it for me in the least. Great graphics, great sound design, a ton of characters, and really fun and addictive gameplay combined with a bunch of different ways to play make this one my favorite in the entire KOF catalog. Really, as a whole, this is one of my all-time favorite series of games, and any King of Fighters game is going to be a good time, but if I'm given the choice of only one, then it's gonna be King of Fighters 11. It's awesome.
You win!
Number 1. Fatal Fury Special. This was another difficult choice. I knew a Fatal Fury game would be at number 1. It is, after all, my favorite SNK series, and for a while I was considering putting in one of the later games, like Real Bout 2, or perhaps the most obvious choice, Mark of the Wolves. But I just couldn't say no to this game. Ever since that fateful weekend that I stayed at a friend's house and played Fatal Fury Special on the SNES for the first time and watched Fatal Fury the Motion Picture on VHS, I was hooked. I love everything about it. And when playing the NeoGeo original, that love just continued to grow. I love the signature classic Fatal Fury gameplay. I love the beautiful and colorful 2D graphics. I love the outstanding soundtrack and sound effects, and perhaps most of all, I love these characters. This roster is amazing. I can still remember flipping through the instruction manual that weekend and reading everybody's bios and loving the designs of each character, and also remarking that they didn't really look like they did in the anime. Regardless, this is the Fatal Fury game I go back to most often. It's the game that made me an SNK fan to begin with. Fatal Fury, my all-time favorite SNK series, and Fatal Fury Special, my favorite game in that series, and in SNK's entire fighting library.
Okay.
So there you go, my top 10 SNK fighting games. I hope you enjoyed it, and do let me know down in the comments what some of your favorites are, And until next time, thanks for watching, everybody. Goodbye.